What's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. AV Obsessed here, and if you're watching this video, that means that you probably are too. And you'll have to forgive me for this video because I am actually feeling pretty sick right now, but I decided I have to power through it and make this video for you guys because I'm finally bringing you the video where I'm comparing the KEF R3 Metas to the KEF Q Concerto Metas. Are the R3 Metas worth the $900 over the Q Concerto Metas? Hopefully by the end of the video, you'll be able to decide that for yourself. So, just talking about the dimensions and weight of the speakers, they're actually extremely similar when it comes to the dimensions. The R3 Metas are 3/8 of an inch taller than the Q Concerto Metas. The R3 Metas are 3/4 of an inch deeper than the Q Concerto Metas. And then the Q Concerto Metas are 3/8 of an inch wider than the R3 Metas. So, size-wise, if you're concerned about which speaker is going to fit better in your space, it's not really something that you'd have to worry about because the dimensions are so close. They're all within an inch of each other. But the biggest difference as far as weight and dimensions goes is going to be in the weight because the Q Concerto Metas are 20.9 pounds, the R3 Metas are 27.3, so there's a 6.4 pound difference in the R3 Metas because that's just how much better built the cabinet is. There's quite a bit more bracing, and I believe it's a thicker cabinet. I want to say that the Q Concertos here are 5/8 of an inch thick MDF, while they use 3/4 of an inch thick MDF here. And you can hear that in just like the knock test, like when you knock on the Q Concertos versus the R3s. It's a much denser sounding cabinet, which does pay dividends in the sound department. One thing to think about with that extra weight of the R3 Metas is you are going to want a pretty good quality speaker stand to use with them. So as you can see in this video, I am using different stands than the ones that I have been using in most of the bookshelf speaker reviews that I've done. These are stands that I built myself like years ago when I had a house with a garage and a nice little shop where I could work on stuff like this. These are just made out of, solid hard wood, so they're sturdier, that can hold up these big, heavy bookshelf speakers. And I would say you're going to want that either way with these because these are also pretty big, heavy bookshelf speakers. So, talking about the difference in drivers between the two as well, the R3 Metas and the Q Concerto Metas here both have 6.5-inch woofers. The R3 Metas, though, it's supposed to be an aluminum material put over a paper cone, which is kind of interesting. You'd think that'd just be adding unnecessary mass, but It's an aluminum on paper design, and then they'd have the inverted rubber surround here so that the shadow flare can go right up to the edge of the woofer with like just about like a 2 millimeter gap between the aluminum of the woofer, like the aluminum on top of the paper and the shadow flare. On this side, it's a little bit more of your standard design where you have just a standard aluminum cone and a normal rubber surround, and the shadow flare just goes right up to the rubber surround. Both speakers, they did a good job using this plastic shadow flare design to cover up the fasteners. On the R3 Meta, you get a 5-inch mid-range surrounding a 1-inch hybrid aluminum dome tweeter, and then on the R3 Meta, you get a 4-inch mid-range surrounding a 3/4 inch aluminum dome tweeter. So some pretty like decent differences between the drivers of the two speakers. So enough with the obvious differences between the two. What do I actually hear when I'm listening between these two speakers? So I've been listening to them going back and forth for about like 2.5 weeks now with these two speakers. And one day I spent like almost an entire day with both the speakers on stands right next to each other, just switching A, B between the concertos and the R3s. And the main thing is that the bass is basically identical to my ears between these two speakers. They both put out a pretty amazing amount of bass for a bookshelf speaker. Definitely like owing to the fact that they're both 3-way designs. So these 6.5-inch woofers are not mid-bass drivers. They are actually like truly crossed over as woofers for both speakers. But the differences are going to be primarily in the mids and the highs between the two. And the R3 Meta is clearly a more refined and open sounding speaker. As you'll see in the measurements in a little bit here, the R3 Meta just has a little bit more clarity in the mids and the treble. The Q Concerto Meta, it has a pretty decent amount of information up there, but when you go back and forth between these two side by side, it makes the difference pretty obvious between the two. So you just hear, it's almost kind of counterintuitive because the R3 Meta sounds clearer and has more information in the mids and the highs, while still not sounding harsh in any way. The Q Concerto Meta, in comparison to the R3 Meta, particularly in like violins and stuff like that, it can sound a little bit more harsh and like shrill in comparison to the R3 Meta. When you're listening to it on its own, it sounds fine. You don't really hear that, but just in comparison to the R3 Meta, it doesn't sound nearly as refined. And then soundstage and imaging, the R3 Meta feels like it's got a little bit more three-dimensionality to it than the Q Concerto Meta does. And that really just makes it so that it sounds much more engaging. Like, I mean, my favorite thing with speakers is their ability to disappear and just give me like the placement of the singer. And you know, when you're listening to a song and you hear the singer here and like a guitar player here and the drummer sounds like they're here, that's just like it's magic in my mind. Like the ability that stereo systems that are set up properly can have, and you can get that out of the Q Concerto Metas, but everything seems just a little bit more defined in three-dimensional space with the R3 Metas. So I think the next part I'm going to put up is going to be the sound comparisons, where I had, you know, stereo Rode microphones set up, you know, pointing left and right in the room, and then going back and forth between the two so that we can see if you guys can hear the differences between these two speakers. Now, obviously, this is not going to be what these speakers would sound like if they were in your room. It's just valuable information for comparison's sake.
Once a day that I would pray for you. I'd go and misbehave just so you notice too. Sneaking looks up and down from across the room. Damn, what a hell of a view. I feel good, you look great. I like you, I can't wait. A first time, a first date. You're so fun, I'm so late. You sip one, I drink straight. Don't waste time to my place. I feel my heart erase. So catch me if I fall. Once a day that I would pray for you. I'd go and misbehave just so you notice too. Sneaking looks up and down from across the room. Damn, what a hell of a view. I feel good, you look great. I like you, I can't wait. A first time, a first date. You're so fun, I'm so late. You sip one, I drink straight. Don't waste time to my place. I feel my heart erase. So catch me if I fall.
right, so getting into the graphs, the way I gather these graphs is I just put the mini DSP UMic 2 on a stand on my couch at the exact like listening position, height-wise and everything, as when I'm sitting on my couch listening to the speakers. And I play them in stereo so that they're both playing in the room. That way you can get an accurate graphical representation of what I am hearing from each speaker in my room. I do this because I don't have a clip-on near-field scanner or an anechoic chamber or anything like that. I'm not that fancy. But at least this is showing you what I heard when I was measuring or when I was listening to these speakers. And right away, like starting off at 70 decibels, you could see bass is almost identical. For some reason, the big bump that I get at around 75 hertz is a little bit higher on the Q Concerto Metas than it is on the R3 Metas. But other than that, like the bass pretty much tracks the same, and it seems like there's a little bit more like bumpiness in the graph for the Q Concerto Metas as well, and I think that that's cabinet related, because when I was listening to these speakers, I did hear some resonance in the cabinet, especially in some lower male vocals. But once you get past 2 kilohertz, that's where the biggest differences are. You can tell that the white line, which is the R3, hangs out closer to that 70 decibel reference line. And then when you move up to the 80 hertz measurement, looks pretty much identical, where the bass from like around 40, 45 hertz is the same. The peak that I get at 70 is about the same. And then once you're past 2 kilohertz, again, the R3 hangs out closer to the reference line. And then once we're at 90 decibels, it didn't really capture this in the graph. But one thing I do have to say is that the Q Concerto Metas didn't handle 90 decibels in the bass region all that well. There was some port chuffing and almost sounded like the woofers were like borderline bottoming out. So if you're going to run these super loud, you probably will want to have a crossover set at 40 hertz at least, probably more like 50 or 60 though. And then, through most of the mid-range, it's pretty similar. And then once you get past 2 kilohertz, again, the lines kind of diverge a little bit, and the white line stays closer to that 90 decibel reference volume line, just so you can see that there is a little bit more detail in the R3s versus the concertos. So now that you have heard the audio clips and seen the graphs for yourself, I guess it's time to make a judgment. Which would you guys buy? Let me know in the comments. Do you think that the small differences that make the R3 Meta the better speaker are worth $900? Me personally, if I had to choose, $1,300 for these or $2,200 for these, I would go with the $2,200 option. And I don't make a ton of money. I'm just this passionate about these speakers. Like if somebody told me, you have to buy and only listen to one of these 2 different pairs of speakers for the next year, like that I was just gonna be locked in. I had to have one of these 2 options, and I had to pay for them with my own money. It would be the R3 Meta versus the Q Concerto Meta. The Q Concerto Meta still represents like some of the best value in hi-fi, but the R3 Meta is just like enough of a step up, in my opinion, that it's worth it. And then just like, obviously this is superficial, but it's so much better looking of a speaker. It's so much nicer. And I really like the finish, like the finish options that you get on the R3 Meta versus the Q Concerto Meta. I mean, I would have a hard time deciding between these 2 speakers versus deciding between this speaker in the indigo gloss or the walnut, because they both look so good. This black gloss finish is pretty nice too. Like, I do like it. but it's not special enough like that. But that indigo gloss is just so good looking. But then the walnut is also just a really, really nice option, and it would match my salamander stand here really nicely. And it'd be a little bit easier to keep clean because I wouldn't have to worry about the fingerprints on it. The finish options on the Q Concerto Meta being this like standard brushed white or standard brushed black, or the fairly low quality looking walnut wrap. Just, I mean, obviously, I know I'm being very superficial here, but I'm not a fan of the fact that those are your only options. I mean, maybe if I had to live with these speakers for the rest of my life, I could peel off this this vinyl finish and sand the speakers down a little bit and give them a nice quality paint job. Like, that would be kind of a fun project. But with the R3 Metas, you wouldn't have to do that to get them to actually look as classy as the sound quality makes you think they should be, because these speakers, basically, they perform at a higher level than what they look like. So for me, my opinion, I would spend the extra money to get the R series, and I feel like anybody who bought the R series and then was irritated about the fact that KEF put out this new Q series and the performance is so good that some of the people who own the R series feel like they got ripped off when they bought when KEF came out with the Q series. Like, just stop thinking that way, honestly. Like, it's totally unnecessary. Like, you're just making yourself mad for no good reason, because the R3s are like a noticeably better speaker in sound quality and in the cosmetics department. So that's my take on it. But like I said, it's all up to you guys. Like, you could leave it in the comments which ones you think you would buy. Also, while you're down there, make sure to like this video and subscribe and ring the notification button so you can see the next video that I put out. And hopefully I won't be sick anymore by the time I make my next video.